The North remembers, and Wyman Manderly seems to be behind a lot of what's going on in the North in A Dance with Dragons. But what is his plan? Let's take a look. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel we cover A Song of Ice and Fire, The Lord of the Rings, The Witcher and other great fantasy books and TV shows. Welcome. In the absence of the Starks, and with the Boltons in the ascendancy, leadership of the Loyalist North is in something of a vacuum as A Dance with Dragons starts. Most of the great houses in the North recognise that in the short term at least, they need to acknowledge the Boltons' new rulership. But most have also lost loved ones at the Red Wedding, or find they have heirs or family members prisoners of the Lannisters or Freys. They aren't happy, and that's putting it mildly. They need to play the game while winter is coming and the North is struggling, bide their time until they know who is on their side and can pull together a true Northern alliance of Stark loyalists. They need a leader. Enter Wyman Manderly. It has to be admitted, Wyman Manderly is an unlikely hero. Friend and foe alike note that he is too fat to sit a horse. Instead, on long journeys, he is carried in a litter with plenty of breaks for meals and other refreshments. He doesn't just have a double chin, he has four. He moves slowly, appears amiable and without firm principles. A bit of a walkover, basically. Imagine Viserys I before the start of the Dance of the Dragons, liked by many, but not famed for his iron will. That rather portly figure and flabby reputation didn't happen overnight. Wyman overindulged for years during the long peace of Robert Baratheon's rule. If we were to defend him, we would point out that he was head of the only city in the north and probably the richest house. White Harbour and its citizens thrived under his rule. Perhaps he had earned a little bit of overeating. Anyway, as far as even his loyal citizens were concerned, he was Lord Lamprey. To others, Lord Lard, or even Lord Pig. The thing is, this is all a front. Wyman Manderly is very aware of his public image and uses it extremely effectively to get what he wants, as we will see later in this video. And he does have principles, is ruthless and brave, willing to put himself in danger to achieve his objectives. Taking a step back for a moment, let's just acknowledge that House Manderly are one of the most loyal houses to House Stark in the entire North. Many northern houses are only bannermen to the Starks because at some point in the past, the Starks defeated them in battle. They used to be kings of their own lands, in their own right, and now have to accept their diminished role. Not so the Manderlys, who, though I'll do their whole history in another video, were at their lowest ebb, kicked from their lands in the south when the Starks welcomed them, allowed them to keep their own culture and worship their own gods, and gave them command of what became White Harbour. House Manderly grew stronger and richer and prouder than ever, and they swore eternal loyalty to the Starks. When Ned called the banners in Robert's Rebellion, the Manderlys were there. When Robb called them again in the main story, they were there again. It will be a regular occurrence in these videos looking at the Northern Alliance that houses lost loved ones at the Red Wedding. It wasn't just Robb and Cat who were killed. Dozens of Northern houses lost heirs, soldiers and loved ones, either killed by the Boltons and Freys or captured. Yes, these houses we are looking at are loyal to the Starks, but they also have personal grievances against the Boltons and Freys. Wyman had 2 sons and sent both of them to support Robb. Wendell was killed at the Twins and Willis captured by the Lannisters in the Battle of the Fords of the Trident. It was clear that Wyman's priority was to get his remaining son back alive, and after that, get revenge on those who had wronged his family. Oh, and restore the Starks to power if he could. To get Willis back, he had to persuade Tywin Lannister that he would be loyal to them and the Boltons. He starts with the obvious moves, replying with an obfuscating letter to Stannis' demand for fealty, publicly refusing to entertain Robert Glover's attempts to raise forces for the clearly Stark loyalist Glover remnants, taking down any Stark banners over the city. Then, when 3 Freys arrive with Wendell's bones, he welcomes them while clearly negotiating with first Tywin, then Cersei for the release of Willis. His chance to prove his absolute loyalty came with the arrival of Davos Seaworth, Stannis' Hand of the King in White Harbour. That Davos chapter in A Dance with Dragons is a wonderful read, and it is clear that Wyman puts on a bravura performance in complimenting his Frey guests, dismissing Davos's pleas and condemning him to death. Sure enough, The next day, a head dipped in tar with an onion in its mouth, and a hand with shortened fingers appeared on spikes on the walls of the city. It was enough for Cersei to accept Wyman's loyalty. Perhaps it might not have been enough for Tywin, but we'll never know. And she ordered the release of Willis Manderly, who duly arrived back in White Harbour some time later. It seems that particular deal cost Wyman Manderly 3,000 golden dragons, the marriages of 3 close members of his family to the Freys, and a pledge of loyalty to the new rulers. But he got back his son, and clearly had no intention of going through with any of the rest of it. Which is when we, the reader, get to see everything Wyman had been doing behind the scenes. We already knew from Davos being observant that he had been upping the defences of the city and was building ships out of sight. Just as an aside, there were hints early on that Wyman Manderly had more layers than most people credited him with. Bran notes in A Clash of Kings that Lord Wyman dances gracefully, despite his size, and also that he looks at him with less pity in his eyes than most other lords. But now we get this. Davos had obviously not been executed, but instead held prisoner away from everyone else, in reasonable comfort, it has to be said. Robert Glover had not been refused aid, but instead brought into the inner circle of confidants. Wyman himself picks up the story, talking to Davos. "I did not dare defy King's Landing so long as my last living son remained a captive. Lord Tywin Lannister wrote me himself to say that he had Willis. If I would have him freed unharmed, he told me, I must repent my treason, yield my city, declare my loyalty to the Boy King on the Iron Throne, and bend my knee to Roose Bolton, his Warden of the North. Should I refuse, Willis would die a traitor's death. White Harbour would be stormed and sacked, and my people would suffer the same fate as the Rains of Castamere. I am fat, and many think that this makes me weak and foolish. Mayhaps Tywin Lannister was one such. I sent him back a raven to say that I would bend my knee and open my gates after my son was returned, but not before. There the matter stood when Tywin died. Afterward, the Freys turned up with Wendell's bones, to make a peace and seal it with a marriage pact, they claimed. But I was not about to give them what they wanted until I had Willis, safe and whole, and they were not about to give me Willis until I proved my loyalty. Your arrival, he says to Davos, gave me the means to do that. That was the reason for the discourtesy I showed you in the Merman's Court, and for the head and hands rotting above the seal gate. Even the nature of that meeting between Wyman and Davos shows the depths of Wyman's deception. I have just come from the high table, Lord Wyman went on. I have eaten too much, as ever, and all White Harbour knows my bowels are bad. My friends of Frey will not question a lengthy visit to the privy, we hope. Wyman Manderly is using his own well-earned reputation for gluttony and long trips to the privy to plot and build alliances, a tactic he will continue to use when in Winterfell. It might not be pleasant to think about, but it is next-level deceptive, years in the making, and effective. Wyman Manderly is a first-rate player of the Game of Thrones. Anyway, it emerges that he and Robert Glover have been questioning Wex, a survivor of the burning of Winterfell, who told them that Bran and Rickon survived. Bran is who knows where, but Rickon is apparently on Skagos. Davos is sent to Skagos to collect Rickon, so the Northern Lords have someone to rally behind. In return, he will bend the knee to Stannis. This is pure pragmatism from Wyman, by the way. There's no indication he particularly cares about Stannis or his claim, but Stannis currently has a large army in the north and is opposed to the Boltons, and is seemingly keen to restore the Starks to Winterfell, the enemy of my enemy, etc. Which is when things get a bit dark. We leave Davos at that point. We'll presumably pick up on him early in the Winds of Winter. But Wyman Manderly has been entertaining 3 Freys who brought back the bones of his other son Wendell, but his loathing for them is clear. They murdered his son, and now he is supposed to marry his own family to them, and has to pretend to be loyal and supplicant. Just listen to him speak. Foes and false friends are all around me, Lord Davos. They infest my city like roaches, and at night I feel them crawling over me. The fat man's fingers coiled into a fist, and all his chins trembled. My son Wendell came to the twins a guest. He ate Lord Walder's bread and salt, and hung his sword upon the wall to feast with friends. And they murdered him. Murdered, I say. And may the Freys choke upon their fables. I drink with Jared, jape with Simond, promise Rhaegar the hand of my own beloved granddaughter, but never think that means I have forgotten. The North remembers, Lord Davos. The North remembers. And the mummer's farce is almost done. My son is home. Something about the way Lord Wyman said that chilled Davos to the bone. Sure enough, Wyman soon accepts Roose Bolton's summons to attend him at Barrowton and sets off, very slowly. So slowly that the three Freys, Jared, Simond and Rhaegar, ride on ahead on horses given to them as a gift by Wyman Manderly. It's a subtle point, but probably important to Wyman Manderly. We all know that giving a gift of bread and salt was a sign and promise of guest right, protection under your host's roof. Giving a gift on leaving was an official end to guest right. And those three Freys, riding their gift horses, disappeared. It's all a bit suspicious, and the more switched-on Freys acknowledge it. This is Hostine Frey confronting Wyman about it. "Where are my kin, Manderly? Tell me that. Your guests who brought your son back to you." "His bones, you mean?" Manderly speared a chunk of ham with his dagger. "The road has many dangers, sir. I gave your brothers guest gifts when we took our leave of White Harbour. We swore we would meet again at the wedding. Many and more bore witness to our parting." "Many and more," mocked Aenys Frey, "or you and yours." "What are you suggesting, Frey?" The Lord of White Harbour wiped his mouth with his sleeve. "I do not like your tone, sir. No, not one bloody bit." "Step out into the yard, you sack of suet, and I'll serve you all the bloody bits that you can stomach," Sir Hostine said. Wyman Manderly ordered the deaths of those three Freys, and everyone knows it, though no one can prove it. And if you're wondering, yes, Roose Bolton is very aware that Wyman Manderly is only feigning loyalty. Theon thinks that Roose won't let Lord Manderly survive the battle with Stannis, and Theon, even in his current state, is surprisingly insightful about these things. "My fat friend Lord Wyman plots betrayal," says Roose, "and Horsebane, the Umbers may seem simple, but they are not without a certain low cunning. I've said many times that the political situation at Winterfell when the Boltons and their allies, real and otherwise, turn up is complex, and one aspect of this is that whereas many lords arrive who may be anti-Bolton and pro-Stark, none of them can be sure of anyone else's loyalties. It's not just Wyman Manderly who has been playing games. A later video in this series will break down everyone's exact loyalties, but it's clear that from the start Wyman Manderly is the main convener of opposition. But first, perhaps, we get his personal vengeance. I said this would get a bit gruesome, and at the wedding feast of Ramsay and the fake Arya, Wyman Manderly presents Roose and Walder Bolton and the two most senior Freys present with a slightly odd wedding gift, 3 huge pork pies to match the 3 missing Freys. He seems delighted with this gift. "The best pie you have ever tasted, my lords. Wash it down with Arbor Gold and savour every bite. I know I shall." He proceeds to eat 2 slices of each pie, which seems enough to convince Roose that they aren't poisoned, at least. But still, he seems very happy, weirdly so. Barbary Dustin says to Theon that, "The best pork pie we ever tasted, our fat friend would have us believe. Have you ever seen a fat man so happy? He's almost dancing, serving it with his own hands." All very odd. Then, on the way out, a clearly very drunk Wyman demands the bard, Abel the bard, sing about the Rat Cook. The Rat Cook is a northern legend of a Night's Watch cook who broke guest right, killed a king's son, baked him in a pie, and served him to his father. The clear implication is that Wyman murdered the Freys and served them to their relatives in revenge for the Red Wedding. I said this would get gruesome. But then Wyman has to return to the serious business of building a coalition, which meant meeting people in secret, and sometimes building on his reputation for long trips to the privy. Roger Riswell notes that he loves his steaks and chops and meat pies, though prowling the castle by dark would require him to leave the table. The only time he does that is when he seeks the privy for one of his hour-long squats. And before you know it, he seems to be forming quite a coalition. The cryptic snowmen I talked about a few videos ago suggest that he has correctly identified Hothor Horsebane Umber as a fellow Stark loyalist, plus Lord Stout, whose house has been eaten out of its winter supplies by Ramsay, and maybe even Barbary Dustin, who hates Ramsay perhaps even as much as she hated Ned. What next? Well, the growing tensions between the Freys and the Manderlys has led Roose Bolton to send both out to confront Stannis. Expect the Manderlys to turn on the Freys. That battle won't turn out how Roose or most people expect. Willis Manderly was last seen a broken man on his release from Harrenhal, collapsing into a puddle on the floor when told he would be going home. Hopefully he will make a recovery, but him not going to Winterfell means that White Harbour remains strongly in Manderly control. Wyman Manderly himself feels like a man not expecting to live long. Perhaps there is some foreshadowing in Davos thinking that he looks like half a corpse. He has got his son back, exacted his revenge on the Freys and Boltons, and set everything up for a great Northern alliance to rise up against Roose Bolton and in favour of the Stark candidate he has ordered found. What else does he need? Wyman Manderly is one of the most underrated players of the Game of Thrones. He has spent decades building up a public image as a fat, cowardly, weak leader. And now, in what are surely the last few months of his life, he is exploiting that image to the maximum, taking bloody revenge where he can, saving his family and inheritance, and building an alliance that will bring the Starks, his liege lords, back into power in Winterfell. The North remembers. Wyman Manderly remembers. If you'd like to see more A Song of Ice and Fire videos, please click on the link on the left of your screen. Or if you'd like to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.